Welcome to our November resource group, and thanks everybody for joining us today. Super excited to be here with Emily Hutto from Radcraft. And per usual, I want to go through some housekeeping to start, and then we'll kind of launch into the getting to know Emily and finding out her tips and tricks about social media survival, which is pretty much what I call it when you're thinking about your day-to-day stuff. For starters, our format today, as usual, is we're going to talk about thanking our sponsor, talk about a little in terms of what's coming up, events coming up, our mission statement, and then kind of launch into saying hello to Emily, learning about her world, how she got where she is, some advice from the road, as it were, and then some questions. And I suspect Emily's good with questions as we go also. Is that fair? Yeah. Okay. So we'll take questions as we go, and then we can certainly take questions at the end and then branch out into other topics if the conversation takes us there. So that's something that's a pretty normal thing for these conversations. Sponsor wise, we'd really love to thank White Labs again for sponsoring our resource groups. Their team of homebrewers has turned their world into a fabulous place of science and resources for all kinds of wet and dry yeast, for labs, for all sorts of innovations. And you can check out their website at whitelabs.com to find out more of what they have coming on board. They have been a resource, I think, for all of us at one point in time or another, and have been super supportive of all of our efforts with Startup Brewery. So thank you to Neva and Eric. I need to touch base with Eric now that he's with the San Diego Brewers Guild and check in with him as well. Our mission, we always try to just kind of reset a little bit and talk about why we're here. When Candace and I started this mission, our goal was to raise the bar of startups and new breweries through education. And we've continued that and realized it also serves the purpose of breaking down the barriers and lowering those barriers to people who want to live their dream and don't know where the resources are to learn how to do that or to find that support. So working in both of those areas here with Startup Brewery. What else? We have a lot coming up. Next Wednesday, Fred Kaplan is going to do our fourth quarter educational webinar with craft beer professionals. Andrew is going to go live with him. I'll be there too on Wednesday at our usual time. And Fred's going to talk about considerations before purchasing a brewery. He's with Stony Hill Advisors, has been for a long time, and has a lot of wisdom for all of you who are thinking about purchasing an existing brewery. In podcast world, we just had a podcast episode land yesterday. I'm on the wrong page here. That's not helpful for anybody. There we go. Episode 23 landed yesterday. Your business plan and financing, how much does it matter? So that was a really good session with Rick Wayner of Brewery Finance and Scott Berkner from Dogwood State Bank. We also have coming up our December resource group. That's going to be with Bryn Keenan from Grist Analytics, also sponsored by White Labs. So that's going to be a super informational session as well. And then last but certainly not least, Candace and I are going to do a final podcast episode on the 21st. It's going to be released to wrap up this podcast season. So super excited about all those things. Okay, I think I covered all the checklists. So Emily, would love to bring you on board. So excited to have you today in our spotlight. And will you introduce yourself a little bit, talk about who you are and what you do when you're not dealing with beer?
Absolutely, Laura. It is a joy to be spotlighted. I'm really flattered. Thanks for inviting me. And hi, everyone, for joining and listening in. I own Radcraft. I started the business in 2012 to serve the communications needs of craft breweries and craft beverage makers far and wide. I say beverage makers because things at Radcraft have evolved slightly in the last almost 11 years to include elements of the beer industry like malt and hops and allied trade professionals and companies that weren't just breweries. But at my core is a love of craft beer and craft breweries, and that's why Radcraft was started. I'm a journalist turned marketing professional. I stepped onto the dark side after many years of beer writing so that I could help craft breweries to do their marketing and sales and things like that. Um, and that really stemmed because I wrote a book called Colorado's Top Brewers, and many of the breweries that I interviewed for that book discovered that I always say, that I could write complete sentences in the meantime, and they asked me to help them out with their brands so that their social media was could could be evolved and could be better. Social media was just kind of coming online as a tool for craft breweries 11 years ago, more than that, but it really got to be significant then. And because I happen to be one of those old millennials who had social media as part of my schooling in journalism school, where I went to the University of Oregon, that skill set, also my PR background and journalism background, have served me really well to help brewers and beyond. Outside of beer, I do love lots of other beverages. I have a sake certification that's similar to a sommelier or a cicerone's equivalent in sake brewing, tasting, and experiencing. And then outside of alcohol altogether, I love yoga. I teach yoga. I spend a lot of time with my dog Jocelyn in the San Juan Mountains of Colorado, where I live in Durango. And I love to be outside. And it turns out that in order to be outside more, I have to be inside on Zoom calls like this remotely for a living. And it's a true pleasure to find that balance and join you all today.
It's really nice that we can do the Zoom calls and we don't have to go to civilization though, right?
Oh my goodness, yes. And I wouldn't have Laura and Candace in my life on such a regular basis if it weren't for technology. So there are no complaints here on the tools.
On the tools. There you go. So specifically with clients, what problems do you solve? I think the complete sentences is one. What other problems do you tackle on their behalf?
I'm not solving my own lack of complete sentences, but on their behalfs, I do hope to help there. So we look at Radcraft as a holistic communications support vessel. Sometimes we are the entire remote marketing team for a business. Sometimes we're writing out a press release to send to a customized media list in their town for an event that might be happening. Sometimes we are the support helping to strategize on creating a content plan and content calendar. Pretty much anything under the marketing sun as it pertains to a craft brewery, distillery, malt house, and occasional hot farm is really our specialty. So when someone comes to work with Radcraft, the question gets turned around quickly on, well, what is it that you need? How it's not really a specialized set, or I should say it's specialized, but it's not really a set of services that we offer set in stone is that term that I was looking for. We're really trying to look at the marketing program that you have at your company holistically and then fill the holes, bridge the gaps as needed. So everything from consulting to sometimes sending the tweets, as I always say. Um, to get a little more granular though, usually a common problem that we solve at Radcraft is I I understand why social media is of value. Let's just say marketing, big picture, is of value. I have people in place to do said marketing. I just don't know how to guide them, give them tools in effort to make our social media, our PR, our digital advertising, all of those things really work for us. So a regular problem that we solve is less about finding people to do the work or helping them to understand the value of some of these tools. It's really to give them tools, like content calendars, which aren't us doing the content, or I should say, curating and creating the content and posting it for you. It's us giving advice on the sequence and the volume at which you should put it out there. So consulting is my one word answer to your question. And I went into a short ramble so that you could all understand kind of the gist of what we do.
I love the fact that it's not just a cookie cutter thing. It's what do you need?
Thanks. Thank
Um,
you.
I
I
suspect
mean,
that
it makes my
sometimes,
life chaos. I have 2,500 tabs open right now, but
right?
it helps, I think, to look at whoever the company is and who it's run by. That term bespoke, I think, is sometimes misused, but may be applicable here.
There you go. I think we've kind of got a little bit of what led you into this space, but was there one catalyst? Was there one piece that made craft beer important or kind of that focus?
Yeah, it was homebrewing. I was a home brewer before I could legally drink the stuff. I could buy the ingredients, so it was no problem. I had roommates in college who were from Chico, and they introduced me to my first love, Sierra Nevada Pale Ale. I'm sure some of us have that in common. And I just was so hooked on fermentation and the process, fermentation of all kinds. And I'll nerd out with you all about yogurt and cheese and kimchi and sake another day, but I'll talk specifically about beer, of course, today, and just say that was kind of my first introduction. And always having something bubbling away in the kitchen while I was in journalism school really put two and two together for me that maybe I could pursue my curiosities of homebrewing in this media space. So when it came down to deciding what I wanted to do for a living, it was easy enough to look around and decide that I wanted to keep exploring the abundance of carboys that were in my garage at the time. I don't homebrew as much anymore either. I should say that I really need to get the old gear back out.
I think fermentation is that big old umbrella though. That brings in your all of your ingredients too, which
Agreed.
I think that was not necessarily a left turn, but maybe unexpected to get farther into diving down into the individual ingredients. Yes.
Absolutely. I'm just fascinated by the process. So what started as home brewing and turned into fermentation and became a lot in the brewing space specifically. Now, Radcraft and myself are heavily steeped, sorry for the pun, in the craft malt industry. I think the ingredients that go into beer are absolutely fascinating. We work with a hop farmer here in Colorado as well, and it's always my favorite days out on the farm.
I bet there's some awesome pictures you guys come through out of there too. Um,
Oh yes. If you want
and
your daily dose of happy cows and haystacks, you can hit the Radcraft Instagram feed.
because that's where it comes from. Awesome. All right. What's the coolest project you've ever worked on? Share, dig into those stories.
Mm, okay. Well, I thought a lot about this question in advance, and I think I get this question a lot. Like, what's your favorite thing you've done? Um, so over the course of Radcraft's 11 years, I've spent about half of those years planning and then half of those years executing our co-op, which is such a cop out answer because it's just a compilation of everything that I do. So really I love everything. Everything is so great. But our co-op is a program that a brewery could join in order to get those marketing tools that I mentioned for their existing marketing team or marketing person. And it's a tap into our resources, from software to services to products that really helps a marketing team do their job better and in a more elevated way and in a more connected way. It gives them a community and tools to get that job done. And I think of it as the manual version of our automatic services that we could provide on a larger level. Joining the co-op means you get a ton of tools and resources and support, but you don't pay a lot of money. And it's also a tap into our network at Radcraft. Every year we put out a catalog for our members of vendors who we say speak beer. And that's everything from photography to plumbing. And it really is just a compilation of folks who we love working with, who we're recommending. Um, this really isn't an advertisement of what we do, though I realize it might sound like that slightly. But really my favorite thing that I've done is just take everything that I've learned and package it in a way that I can help a lot of people all at once. And I think Start a Brewery is like that, Laura. It's this beautiful montage and succinct way of a lot of your experience and Candace, so many of your expertise that come into play is just how you've built your own networks and built your own businesses and in a way that can be regurgitated to help others. So I'm really proud of our co-op, and I get to work with a lot of companies that I might not otherwise because it is such a small investment, kind of like dash in the pan type of opportunity where we get companies big and small in all shapes and sizes and locations. So it gives me diversity in my life too.
I say that a lot about the mentorship program too. It's really nice when all of us can use the path that we've walked and the experience that we have to pay it forward and to make it available. And I think you do that
Mhm.
that way, and there's lots of ways we're all doing that with Start a Brewery to just say, can we offer that up and lift and have our experiences be worthwhile down the road for someone else.
So
Um,
beautiful. Yeah,
yeah.
I mean, I always say rise to the occasion with your skill set. And in particular, the timing of startabrewery.com is such a lovely embodiment of that.
And we have all of our cool people, which is nice too. Thank you all. So without saying same thing again, what's the most complex or problematic project?
I promise I won't repeat. So the most complex projects that we ever deal with are the ones that we are confident we know how to solve, but that we have yet to solve. And that involves a lot of collaboration on behalf of our clients, our partners. I'm going to refer specifically to a video project that we did for the Riverbend Malt House in Asheville. They're the South's largest and oldest craft malt house, and they make beautiful products and cover such a wide surface area of locations and just types of industries that they touch. And they came to us a few years back and wanted to celebrate their 10-year anniversary with a video project, a video campaign really that told their story. Well, on for one, this story is massive. It's somewhat abstract to the general consumer. Not every average Instagram user, as an example, knows what malt is. So there was an education element. There was a long format and long-term storytelling element that we were just jumping in on. They'd been around for 10 years already, and we had to learn their brand on the fly to some degree and integrate a lot of what they had already done with what we were doing and have a lot of conversations to collaborate because of that. And then finally, it was extremely low budget. We priced out a variety of different video production groups, and it was always a no way. This is crazy. This isn't in the budget. But video is so important for small brands because it tells that story, and it is the most engaging visual format on the internet right now. So how do you make a video for an established brand around an abstract product with really minimal budget? Lots of conversation. We collaborated with their team to come to some middle ground. We ended up doing all of the video footage ourselves, which allowed us to go to Asheville and check them out, which was really fun, and also required them getting comfortable with video coverage that wasn't going to be shot like a Hollywood film. You can find a video production company to do that for you. And you can also call your scrappy marketing team to show up with their iPhones and GoPros and a variety of other makeshift types of equipment and make a really cool video for you. I can link it to you all if you want to look at it. But I think you'll love it having heard this story because it's not the best video production I've ever seen. It's not the best video script I've ever heard, but we used what we have with um, the resources and the people that we could make work at the time. And I'm really proud of the product. So yeah, it was a solid small business solution there.
Nice. My first reaction was, so tell me you shot it on your cell phone? And the answer was, yeah,
Yep.
actually, we did. All right, so let's get into your tips and tricks today. You want to share your screen, yes?
I will. So I made you all a deck, but mostly so that I can stay on track with what I'm saying. But please jump in with questions in the chat, or I actually, maybe Laura will help me field them too.
Sure. Happy to.
Okay, great. And if you don't have questions until the end or in general, that's cool too. Okay. So all I talk about lately are content calendars, y'all. It's just, I feel like it's the theme of the year. But I also have noticed as business has evolved over the last couple of years and in our 11 years in business, that content is always going to be a reliable resource for a brewery when considering marketing tactics. So although the world, the age of information is changing a lot, I think having really good content and thinking about how you're going to plot that out across your channels in advance is never going to go out of style. And I have been talking about just how to do that with a lot of folks lately. In addition to your names and emails, throw your social media handles in the chat. I'd love to keep in touch that way. This is ours. And as I think, I'm not sure we caught it on the recording, so I'll just say it again. But a lot of times, Radcraft is so focused on our clients' social media. Admittedly, we really don't do it as much as we should. So please engage with us on there, and know that also if you would like industry examples, I am happy to provide even more than what you see here. Anyway, so a content calendar goes way bigger than social media. And I think that because it's almost like a calendar is just when you're going to do stuff. And so it almost sounds too simple. So companies ask me a lot, like, well, what's a content calendar? And it's just that it's a place where you put where you're going to do stuff. And as simple as that term sounds, I define it that way to show you that your content calendar can be exactly customized to your brand and your systems and your people. And it doesn't have to look like anything. It could be an actual calendar, it could be a spreadsheet, it could be some formation of the project management tools that you're using, like a Basecamp or a Trello or an Asana. It's just a place where you define all of your channels and who's going to post what on those channels and when. So to put it really simply, maybe consider how that content calendar would help, or excuse me, would apply to the people and the different systems that you're already using versus create something entirely new. To that point, who has a content calendar? Does anyone work off of one already? Okay. That's a good blend. And Candace is, I think, maybe a new content calendar haver. So I'm really excited for her
I was gonna say,
to raise her hand.
only because I just hired somebody to do my social media and she created it. So
Totally. Yeah. And if you don't want to make your own, like, get somebody to make your content calendar. I'm also just going to give the disclaimer that I have no rhyme or reason for the photos that I chose for this deck. It was just fun photos that we've taken in the last few months.
Well, it was our hops gratification though, right?
What's that?
We needed our pretty hops pictures.
Exactly. And now you get a dog picture. So I'm covering all my bases. So the first tip that I have for making a content calendar is get your team in on it. There's this trend going on right now on social media where someone who is part of the marketing team has a camera and walks into the brewery, and on this video reel, all of the other brewery members, people behind the bar, people in the brew house, are hiding from this person with a camera. And they're like, when the social media person walks into the brewery. And as funny and true as I see that to be, I also want to encourage you to never create a dynamic in your team where that is okay. Content marketing helps you sell your products. And so whether or not you want to be on camera, please appreciate the person who's doing that content marketing and help them out. I think that your team, whether they are doing the posting on social media, writing your newsletter, updating your website, whether they're the people doing those things or not, get everybody in on it. Get that buy-in. Make sure that they all understand its value. Make sure that they all collaborate on the process. And again, whether that's providing photos or even just a space in your all hands on deck meeting to talk about it, just make sure that it's something that is integrated across your team, regardless of how frequently everybody's using it. So the next tip I have for making a content calendar plays into that idea of it can be anything you want it to be. Customize it based on what you already have in place, who's going to be using it, what systems make the most sense to them. For most of the brands that we build content calendars for, we just simply make spreadsheets. That is where they have a lot of their digital life. There's a lot of Google Drive in my life, and those are usually shared documents where several people can have access and follow along, and they're simple. You can get really complicated with a content calendar, and if you want an extremely complicated template, I'm happy to send you one. I'm also happy to send a really simple template that's just, what day is it? What are we posting? Who's posting it? Do we have the photo? Checkbox. It get as complicated or as simple as you want. And I would say that as custom and crazy as you want to get with it, I would keep it to these must-haves. Do not forget your brand when making this calendar. That's not to say that you have a logo on every calendar page. This is an internal document and it can look however you want. But when it comes to determining what you're going to say and what images you're going to use or what videos, for example, always come back to your brand identity. One of the reasons to have a content calendar is to be a good planner in advance so that you can be true and cohesive to your brand, even more so than if you were stressed and posting on the fly because you didn't know what to otherwise post that day, which is a dear, like I should say a problem for most of us. It's near and dear to our hearts because how many times have you been the person or known the person who's like, oh, what am I going to post about today? It's often, and the content calendar can help you not ever have that feeling again. A content calendar must have your sales objectives in mind. That's not to say that you become a sales machine and that's the only thing you ever post about is what's on sale or how much things cost or where you can find products, but it's just to say what are the sales objectives and how can we boost the volume of that type of content or sync up with what the sales team or salesperson or sales objectives are so that our content can ultimately support our bottom line. Before I go on to my next tip about, or my next idea about campaigns, I just want to say that content is anything that your brand owns. So that might be, I think a lot of times people think of content as pictures or videos or even captions, but content is anything that your brand owns. So think about your website, think about your newsletter, think about the sales materials or even just paper products that your brand produces, posters, shelf talkers. I mean, literally, if it has your logo on it, that's content. So, and it could be digital or it could be physical in space. So think widely on this. And again, customize based on what kind of content you have for your brand. So all content calendars, I recommend having campaigns and content series. Campaigns could be something like a new brand that you want to put out that year. Maybe you have a new logger and that logger is one of your main selling that logger is one of your main sales objectives in 2024. Well, I recommend campaigning around that new logger across your channels. And that might look like 3, 6, maybe even 12 months of talking about that logger on a consistent basis. And so that can lead into series of content that recur to support those sales objectives. I also have a lot of recommendations for you for more types of series of content that will not only make your life easy, but also build brand recognition and cohesion thereof. Pretty basic, but it's the whole point. Who's posting what, when, and on what channels. Find a way to communicate to your team cleanly, and make sure there are accountability measures built in, which is why I have workflow as this last one. Identifying who's going to write what, who will edit, approved is in bold for a reason, who's going to post, and then who's going to pull metrics on the performance of all of this stuff. And paying attention to that is valuable, so that not only can your future content be more streamlined and efficient, but hopefully it will help support more sales. Okay, so recurring content is a theme here, and it's my third tip. Here are 30 plus suggestions for types of recurring content that you can put on your content calendar. A couple of them are highlighted because they are obvious and universal to a brewery. I think these are things that most and all breweries have. Product releases is pretty simple. Let's say that you have a new beer coming out quarterly in 2024. Maybe every time you come up or you promote that new beer that has come out, you take a picture of it in the same place in your brewery, or with a bartender, or with your brewery mascot skeleton drinking one every time it comes out, so that each time you have a new product release, your audience recognizes that type of photo as, oh, like this must be new. There's some psychology there to both the repeat and also the same scenario, but different beer plugged in. And that makes things easy on your team. They can go over to that mascot skeleton and take its photo every time that new can comes out, and it can be part of your SOP for putting out a new beer. I put product showcases on here too, because not every beer that you want to talk about on your social media, I hope, is brand new. Flagships matter a lot. So do your seasonals and just maybe one-offs that you have on tap. So find a way to have a repeat series that showcases the different kinds of products that you have. Maybe you're showcasing the label on that product and the story behind it, or the name and why you chose that name, or parts of the ingredient story, or whatever. I could go on, but I think you get the gist that regularly including beers that are your mainstays into your recurring series of content is going to be valuable for sales. I put beer pairings as a highlight here to encourage you all to get crafty with that. Beer and food is one of my favorite things to talk about. I also love the idea of beer and books to read, beer and songs to listen to, beer and outdoor activities to go do. Think about pairings bigger than just food and flavor, and you might have a ton of fun with your content. The beer label stories is a really great idea for recurring content, because if you happen to package your beer, I should say, or create artwork, I should have said beer artwork because some don't always package, but if you happen to create any kind of artwork or visual for each label, people love that visual. They love hearing the story behind it. I recommend checking out hashtag camera to can. It's a series that we created for Living the Dream Brewing, and I love this story. Every one of their beer labels, I keep trying to grab my coffee cup to like demonstrate a beer label, so I think I'm just going to do it. Every one of their beer labels is a picture that one of their staff members took on an outdoor adventure, and they've turned those photographs into beer cans. And so we told the story of how they chose each photo and the adventures that they went on, and why that adventure made sense for that particular beer can. And then it just turned into this really lovely story with its own fun hashtag, camera to can. People loved it, and it gave them something to post about on a weekly or monthly basis, when sometimes I don't want to call it filler content is needed, but sometimes you don't have a release that day. You don't have anything to necessarily post about that's time sensitive. And then you can throw in your camera to can story or your recurring series of whatever else you wanted. And it really helps build the calendar in a way that varies the content and isn't stressful for you. I put what's brewing on here because people want to know what's coming down the pipeline. And it's also really fun to show behind the scenes types of stories. And then I put earned media mentions as another to talk about with you all today. So, how many of you have gotten earned media coverage in the last year, or a mention from an influencer or a favorite Instagram account? I think maybe all of you could raise your hand for that, or maybe since your business. Candace, I'm going to post about you this week so that we can change that. Well, it's regular that another Instagram account or a publication even will post about you. And I would develop a format for which you could share mentions like that. Um, if you want to help, if you want help getting more media mentions, maybe I should send Laura some more resources for Starter Brewery, because I feel like we have a lot of them and I want you all to get all the media credit that you deserve. But what it does is it equalizes your media mentions or your influencer mentions to have a recurring series for that. It talks about, hey, we got this mention from this publication or this person, and this is what they said, in a format that not only, again, builds cohesion for your brand, but shows that influencer or that publication that you really appreciate the mention. Not to mention, it gives you a format for when that comes up again. And that's the beauty of these recurring content series suggestions, is they give you a format. You have an SOP for them. They're not necessarily easy to do, but you have a plan for how you're going to get them done. And you can teach that plan to somebody else. So when you're thinking about outsourcing your social media or even just working with team members, these content, these recurring content series are a great place to start, because there's an easy SOP built in and a checks and balances process for how to do them. And yeah, if you want 30 more, I could probably come up with them because there's just so many. This is a little brewery map or brew house map that I borrowed from the AsianBeerNetwork.com. It took me a while to just find one online. I should have just emailed somebody I know and been like, hey, could I have a map of your tanks? But I put this as my fourth tip because it is so regular when dealing with a live product that things are going to change. It is really hard to say this beer is going to come out on this day and this is exactly how it's going to taste. That's not what you want to ask your back of house or your production team to provide for you when you're creating a content calendar either. But what you can do is ask them what's fermenting right now. If it's an ale, that gives them at least 2 weeks to pull their act together when it comes to maybe some photos or even just a plan for them. And it helps them build their content calendar, knowing, of course, that things might change, but generally speaking, what's to come. Knowing what's on deck matters for those planners. And regularly, my world is breaking up the battle between marketing and production, angry with each other because either production promised a date and marketing can't roll with it anymore, or marketing is begging production for information. Give your brewer a map of their own tanks and say, what's coming down the pipeline? Please fill this out for me every 2 weeks or on a rotation that makes sense for your production schedule. And then I think you've all probably gathered that my last tip is simple but critical. This stuff's going to change. A content calendar is a living, breathing document, and it is not ever meant to be set in stone or give you panic around what day it is. Really, this is supposed to be a guide so that you don't have to stress about what you're going to post that week or that day. I call it schedule Tetris, where something comes up, so you put that post over here, and something changes, so you move that to next week, and you're always jumbling it. And I think some of the best content calendars are created with the intention to change on an immediate basis. I spend time on the content calendars that Radcraft manages weekly with my team, because we need to make sure that everything is still on point for the week. So even build that 10 minutes to look over your content calendar every Monday or every manager's meeting to make those changes, and it will make your marketing team very happy if that's not you already. Those are my tips, and I am here for questions and conversations. Thanks for listening.
I have one for you. Um,
Yeah,
do you feel like there is one or two social media platforms that are most visited by consumers or by brewers?
I do. I think Instagram is the number one for all brewers, consumers, everyone. Instagram is the one right now. And because Instagram is connected with many other social media platforms, TikTok, Facebook, etc., it's a good hub. Um, I think more brewers who are, I should say, more brewers who have been making beer professionally for at least 5 or 10 years tend to be on Facebook. Um, and then even more than that, I hate to be ageist, but Facebook is something that we see people who are in their 40s plus using more readily than people who are in their 20s plus when we're pulling demographics. So keep that in mind. Yeah, Candace just said that before we got on. She's like, I'm a Facebook user. I don't do this other stuff. And I think we all kind of have our platform that we like. Professional brewers tend to be on Facebook. Um, Professional brewers we see a lot on LinkedIn as well, surprisingly. Or maybe unsurprisingly, I find that a lot of folks who are decision makers at brands tend to be in the LinkedIn space. And then also depending on the time in which that person has been brewing, we see brewers on Twitter still. X, excuse me, old millennial again. It's going to take me a while to get that one changed in my vernacular.
Is it going to disappear from our vernacular completely? We don't know this thing.
Well, I was actually going to
Maybe.
ask, are people switching to the meta version Threads? I mean,
Threads.
admittedly, I quit Twitter a long time ago because I just couldn't handle it. It was yeah, I didn't enjoy it, but I'm just wondering if you're seeing any sort of that movement.
I really am. Threads is happening. And the more breweries I see on Threads tend to be smaller in terms of barrelage. I can't blame a regional brewery that already has 6 social media accounts and several people on their marketing team and tons to manage for not maybe wanting to take on a new platform. Whereas breweries that make less beer and tend to be smaller and maybe have 1 or 2 people at best on the marketing crew and tend to have a little more bandwidth for developing threads. Um, I also think there are some demographics to be considered here. Generally speaking, folks on threads are 40 and under right now in the space. And that's a stat that I read pretty recently. I think it's an ever-changing stat though. I mean, threads is just a few months old, so please don't quote me on these things because it is changing every moment. But the younger the audience, the younger the manager of the social media or the owner of the brewery, they tend to be more on threads.
That's true of TikTok too. Yes.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, TikTok used to be a 21 and over platform. So 10 years ago, I was encouraging breweries to stay off of TikTok so that they didn't have customer confusion with age verification. That's changed. Like, yeah, I bet 25. That's a bad number to say, but I'm like, I bet how many more things do I need to know about social media when I get off this call from when I started? Like, that's just how fast this realm is moving right now.
Well, I will tell you that my 11-year-old insists that TikTok is for the younger generation, so like under 21. So we should not be on there.
Yep. 26 things now for me to figure out when I get off this call.
That sounds like he has an ulterior motive. Ben, what do you see? Chris, what are you seeing in terms of
Thanks, Ben.
Threads, LinkedIn stuff?
I mean, I'm pretty much in line with what Emily said. TikTok's tough for us and to recommend because they don't allow alcohol advertising on the platform. It's a restricted item. So whenever I see that, I'm like, well, don't care. because it's like if you can't advertise on some of these platforms that aren't part of your strategy, then it's hard to invest time there. Although it's a powerful platform from a content and organic perspective, to just put content out there. But to Emily's point, and to add to it, it depends on your audience. It depends on where they are, and what you're serving and who you're serving to. So it could be that TikTok's dope for you, but our recommendation is typically Instagram as well. And so we're in line on that one for sure.
I
have
love that
trouble-
you added depends on your audience.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
Laura, go ahead.
No, that's okay. I was going to say I've had trouble promoting posts and LinkedIn if they have the word beer or brewery or anything alcohol as well. They just want to approve the post. I mean, I can post, but I can't boost it.
On LinkedIn as well, they have an alcohol policy. I haven't looked into it on LinkedIn, but it doesn't surprise
That
me.
makes no sense on LinkedIn. Like, kids aren't on LinkedIn. They don't have jobs. I mean, maybe 18 to 21, it's like,
All these stressed out workers, they
Sorry.
need a cocktail after work or something. Let's promote it.
Yeah, no doubt. Dustin, have you converted? Are you on Threads now?
I think it created one automatically that I've never used it. I don't even know what's on there. I just get notifications that we have followers to a page that's doing nothing. I don't post very often. I used to post a lot, but I just haven't had the time.
I mean, I purposely quit. I mean, like quit X for feelings about the company that purchased it. So
there you have it. It's a weird feeling to have things happening to a page that has your name on it that you don't know what's on there.
Mm-hmm. And a lot of people are doing that right now, Candace. A lot of businesses are doing that right now. We've seen a pretty major drop off in audiences on X across the board.
And I suspect that as the political timing of political things get rolling, you'll probably see more considering the people involved.
Mm-hmm.
Probably. Dana, have you migrated or have you just kind of thrown your hands up?
Well, yeah, so we use LinkedIn almost exclusively for our content. I wish they would do a little bit more on Instagram. I'm personally very, very involved on Instagram, and follow breweries on it. But I would like to see more content that we do on Instagram too. Emily, I think you hit the nail on the head.
Thank you. Does anyone use YouTube as one of their social media channels or consider it to be one?
Well, I think Start a Brewery we do, and I have one for Craft Beer Attorney, which we haven't used previously, but I'm now actually starting to think about using as I'm starting to do more reels, but like I'm doing a webinar and I'm basically planning on recording it and putting it on my YouTube channel. So
that's great. Yeah, YouTube statistically is still doing really well for helping small brands. Video is trending. Longer format video is something that is not as engaging on Instagram. So if you want to prioritize Instagram and still utilize a YouTube channel, my recommendation is put up that webinar. I'll use Candace's webinar as an example. Put the webinar on YouTube and then take short snippets of it and put it on your Instagram to send it back to YouTube. I also recommend using that YouTube embed option as much as you can so that someone can still watch a YouTube video on your website, which is where we want to keep that traffic for lots of analytical reasons.
I may come back to you to find out how to do that.
Of course. Yeah.
Dana, what you got?
Yeah, on the YouTube thing, Craft Beer Professionals does their virtual conferences on there, and of course, Start a Brewery obviously was on there, and I think those work really well, and they don't go away. A lot of breweries use stories, and they're gone after 24 hours. Well, the YouTube stuff's there forever, and I like that.
Yeah, I think I consider it to be more of a library resource than I do an ongoing social media sort of platform. But I think it's interesting too, and maybe Dustin, you do a lot of speaking on different channels and different platforms for different events. Do try to pull together all the stuff that you've spoken on in a place where people looking for house architecture stuff can find it?
No, we don't.
Start a brewery.
Yeah, yeah, pretty much. We don't really do much marketing. It's really if someone comes to us and wants us to speak on something or present on something just because of our expertise, we pretty much do it. We don't actively seek out any of those things. Mainly just because of our bandwidth, just don't have the capacity to keep, do that. And that's kind of why our Instagram posting, it was just me. I mean, we're a small office, there's 3 people here, so I got to keep the other people working, and I can kind of take 5 minutes to put a post up every once in a while. But we just don't. I can tell you this: I've never had a client come to us because they saw a Facebook or an Instagram post. All of it comes by word of mouth or maybe seeing me in one of the presentations that we've done.
I've actually gotten clients. I mean, this was years ago when I started out via Facebook posts.
Interesting.
And one thing, if you guys do Zoom webinars, you can generate different links. So basically right now for this webinar I'm doing, I had a link for our Facebook post, a link for the Instagram posts, a link for what we sent via email, and a link for an ad we ran to see where all the registrations are coming. And right now the email and Instagram are tied for the most registrations. It was really interesting though that they allow you that ability to see those analytics, to see where it's coming from.
I didn't know you
That's
could do that.
awesome. Yeah. Well, so to Dustin's point, it's pretty rare that an Instagram post gets you a new customer. And that goes for vendors, I think, especially in the brewing space, because brewers all talk to each other and they get each other's recommendations before they make any moves. And so it's not just that somebody sees you online and they say, okay, I'm going to buy. But even just for someone to choose to go to a brewery, that doesn't always happen with a single post. It's that recurring isn't quite the right word, but it's just that continued volume and frequency of social media posts that builds brand recognition, so that ultimately somebody might be converted. And so what we see is that sending those emails, being in their inbox more frequently, being in their feed on Instagram or you name it, social media channel more frequently, actually makes those brands more notable psychologically for the person who's been absorbing them. So they might not make the decision right away, but that brand recognition, I'm confident, ultimately will kind of send more people your way. I say a lot that marketing and PR especially is a long-term relationship. It's not ever a flash in the pan. So sometimes the redundancy, or it feels redundant to you, but it's really building brand recognition on the other side.
Somebody's going to say, I've heard of them. I've seen them. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's kind of the main reason we were doing it, is more just to kind of, it keeps us connected to our existing clients because most of them will follow us, and just keeps us active in just the community. I mean, we're an architecture firm, but we specialize in breweries. So it's a very niche market for our industry. So I just try to do what we can to stay in front of them as much as I can. And it's more of a kind of a reminder, if anything, if they see us, if they see that we liked something that they're following, just seeing our name repetitively, hopefully triggers them to give us a shout out when they need something.
Well, the rest of us are certainly saying, well, look what Dustin's doing now. Like, let's go figure out what it is.
Yeah, that was part of what we were with our industry. Like we're not allowed to like talk about a lot of projects until they've been announced, or some people don't like us showing progress of things before they're happened. So a lot of our posts may look like, hey, this is my post from today, but it may have been 3 to 6 months ago that it actually happened.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's perfect. It helps. I mean, it makes you know your audience, and every brand has a different lead time for when something happens to when it posts. Putting those types of social media messages out into the world also can help establish you as an authority or an industry leader. If you're more available on social media, you're likely to get frequented more by influencers or possibly journalists. Being available on social media shows approachability to potential customers, existing customers. There's a sense of like comfort, I think, when a brand is out there and transparent and regularly finding itself onto people's feeds that helps them make that decision later when it's time to buy.
Makes me think of Allagash.
Yeah,
What on social media doesn't make you think of Allagash, right?
I know. Those peaceful photos of Maine where they just say, like, here's some Maine for you today. Oh, yes. Put more of that in my feed, please.
Sweet. All right, we're running close on time, but I wanted to can you give us a couple of things that would be kind of important for somebody who's looking for some assistance? What kind of pieces do they need to have in place, or what would be most helpful to you, Emily, if somebody was reaching out for some support? Where's a good space of them being or having things prepared so that you can help more?
Yeah, I love it. I think any good service provider will ask you a ton of questions and see where you're at as a start in the discovery. So start where you are, show up with what you have. But if any kind of brand, I mean, a brewery, yes, but an architecture firm, start with your logo, start with your branding, start with knowing who you are. And that could be a one pager that spells out your brand, or that could be intimate knowledge of your company from one person's perspective. And that's the person who has the conversation. But really knowing who your brand is, and additionally, what your objectives are, can help any service provider help you. It doesn't have to be something that you have spelled out or etched in stone, but generally knowing what your priorities are and who you like to be in your brand voice and in your brand presence can help someone like me help you tell the story. Thanks, Dana.
Yeah, we try to do that by just kind of establishing ourselves as a brand and kind of who we are, what we do, with hopefully with a strong logo. So when people see those, they just kind of it's that same thing. It's just that kind of recognition, something you've seen before, no different than a beer logo, something you recognize. Hopefully that makes it, when it comes time to choose a beer, come time to choose your architect, they know who to call.
Right.
Exactly.
That's trust factor. Interesting. Awesome. Well, we are out of time. I wanted to take a minute to say thank you to Emily for being here. Thank you for all of you for coming today, and for everybody who watches this in the future. And thank you again to White Labs for sponsoring us today. Super awesome to have that support. And you can find all about what they're doing, what's new, what's latest, what's greatest about their analytics, about all the services they provide at whitelabs.com. If you have questions for Emily, you said Hutto at Radcraft?
Yes.
Hutto at Radcraft.
I put my email in the chat. It's hutto@radcraftbeer.com. HUTTO.
Perfect.
Call me, email me anytime.
Harass me anytime. Excellent.
Exactly. Yeah, it won't be harassing. I'll enjoy it.
Awesome. All right. Thank you all. Have a great afternoon.